Rachel stared at the well-dressed man standing in front of her, his words echoing in her mind. "Rachel Green, you have been served," he said, a touch of sadness in his voice. The office fell into dead silence, and for a brief moment, it felt to Rachel as if time had stopped. In her hands, she held the death sentence of a 5-year marriage. With a soft sob, she collapsed into a chair, clutching the papers tightly. Gradually, the office came back to life. The stares, whispers, and disapproving looks grew around her. Suddenly, Rachel heard her friend's gentle voice nearby. "Rachel, let's go," Tess said quietly, taking her hand and pulling her to her feet. "Let's get you to the conference room, away from these onlookers." The black-haired 30-year-old woman led her friend away from the judging eyes of their co-workers. Those who saw it couldn't help but notice the stark change. Rachel, once loud, flirty, and full of life, had become a shell of herself in just minutes. Some found the irony cruelly amusing, while others felt pity. Most had already suspected what had led to the divorce. "How?" Rachel stammered. "I don't understand." Things were just starting to get better. She wrapped her arms around herself as if holding on to her own body for comfort. Tess hugged her, trying to soothe her. "I don't know, sweetie," Tess said gently. "Did Derek say anything? Was there any sign that this was coming?" "None." "Quite the opposite," Rachel replied, struggling for breath. "It was like we were newlyweds again. I thought he was making up for all the time he was gone." Tess flinched slightly, but Rachel didn't miss it. The last 4 months of her marriage flashed before her eyes. Since Derek had returned from Afghanistan, their sex life had been incredible. Better even than when he came back from Iraq 2.5 years ago. He had been so intense, so passionate. "Oh God," Rachel thought, tears welling up. "Most days I could hardly walk after." She smiled sadly, wiping a tear away. It had been so thrilling. "Just last week after I got back from that business trip," Rachel's smile warmed briefly, "Derek completely wore me out. We did it so much I had to beg him to stop." But her smile faded as she saw Tess's questioning look. "No, nothing happened while I was on that trip," Rachel protested quickly. "I told you, it's over." Tess nodded, but her expression was still serious. "When was the last time Derek just hugged you? Or kissed you? When was the last time he made love to you, not just sex?" Tess asked softly. Rachel sat there, dazed, trying to understand. "What?" she asked weakly. Tess sighed. "Rachel, think about it. Was he making love to you, or was it just sex?" Rachel buried her face in her hands, sobbing deeply. "But why? Why would he do this?" She thought for a moment and then suddenly froze. "No," she whispered. "He can't know, can he?" Slowly, she raised her head, fear dawning on her face. "Oh God, Tess," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He knows. Oh God, please no. Please no." Tessa's eyes filled with tears as she held her sobbing friend. She knew Derek well, and if he really knew, it was bad, very bad. Meanwhile, Derek was nodding on his phone. "Thank you, sir," he said, confirming that the package of photos and legal documents had been delivered to Rachel. He hung up and turned his attention to his laptop. With one click, he set in motion something that would change his unfaithful wife's life forever. She would never forget this. Picking up his phone again, Derek dialed a number. "Hello, HR department," a pleasant young voice answered. "How can I help?" "Mr. Brooks, please," Derek said coldly. "This is Derek Green." "Oh, Mr. Green," the woman responded quickly. "Let me transfer you." A few moments later, Derek was speaking to Ethan Brooks, the head of HR. The conversation was brief, and although neither raised their voice, the tension was clear. After hanging up, Derek took a deep breath, glancing at his phone. Rachel had already called 5 times. Not yet, he thought, calming himself. Not yet. There was a sharp knock on the conference room door. When Tess opened it, she immediately recognized the 3 people standing there. Owen Parker, the vice president and head of their branch, stood at the front, impeccably dressed. Behind him was Ethan Brooks, his face red with anger, and Claire Bennett, the office manager and Rachel's boss. "Miss Garnett, we need to speak with Miss Green," Mr. Parker said grimly. "Thank you for your help. Please return to your desk." Tess left, closing the door behind her as the 3 entered. "Miss Green, we have a problem," Parker began. Rachel stumbled into the parking lot, gripping the manila envelope Mr. Brooks had given her. Inside were the incriminating photographs, photos of her with Ryan Carter, the manager from the 3rd floor. Brooks had explained his conversation with Derek. Derek had threatened to expose the company for ignoring its code of conduct if they didn't address the issue. He said he would talk to Rachel first before deciding on any legal action. Mr. Brooks told her they would deal with Ryan next, but advised her to go home and speak to Derek before things got worse. He also informed her that they would all sit down to discuss her future in the company tomorrow, after she had met with her husband. Rachel struggled to find her car, her vision blurred by tears. The bright sunlight glared off the cars, making it harder to pick hers out of the lot. But her car wasn't exactly hard to spot. The big black Hyundai Santa Fe was far from inconspicuous. She climbed inside, remembering the arguments that led to Derek finally agreeing to rent the car for her. He had given in just before leaving for Afghanistan. Wiping her eyes, she slipped on her dark sunglasses and headed home. A man sitting in an old Chevrolet sedan parked nearby pressed a button on his phone. "Thank you, Dan," Derek said, his voice calm. "No, that's all. Make sure to tell Tom you both did a great job, and a bonus is well deserved. Thanks again." "Goodbye," Derek sighed as he glanced at his laptop. One more call, he thought. Just one more, and there'd be no going back. Then again, why should he go back at all? What was left for him? Just a cheating wife who had torn his heart out and a marriage that couldn't be fixed. Derek shook his head and pulled out his phone, quickly dialing a number. First ring, second ring, third, then a soft click followed by silence. Derek stared at the video feed on his laptop, emotionless. After a few minutes, a single tear slipped down his cheek. Rachel pulled the big SUV onto the highway and groaned. She hoped she could dodge rush hour traffic, but seeing how slow everything was moving, she slammed her fist on the steering wheel. At this speed, her usual 30-minute commute would stretch into an hour. Her thoughts drifted to her marriage, the chances of salvaging anything. Derek had found out about her affair. Before Iraq, maybe he would have forgiven her, but not now. The pictures were from while he was in Afghanistan. She sobbed again, knowing exactly what must be going through his mind. Even with the odds stacked against her, she felt like she had to try to save their marriage. After all, she still loved him. A funny way to show it, right? She thought bitterly, scolding herself. She had cheated on him not once but twice, both times while he was off serving his country. She shook her head, trying to shove down the guilt and shame, but the tears flowed again. Trust had never come easily to Derek. His childhood had made sure of that. His dad ran out on him and his mom when he was young, and his mom had been a raging alcoholic. In the 5 years they'd been married, Rachel had only seen Derek's mother twice, once at their wedding, and once when their son was born. It had taken years for Derek to trust her. When they first met in college, she knew what she was getting into. He was a soldier. She thought she could handle it. He had already served 2 years and was working toward his engineering degree. They had dated for a year before Derek proposed, and she could still remember her father's reaction. "No, Rachel, this isn't about Derek," her father had said. "I think he'll be a good husband. But you. I don't think you'll make a good military wife. Don't be upset, honey, but it's damn hard to be a good spouse when your partner's gone for a year at a time. James Reed, her father, had served in the Navy for 4 years when Rachel was little. She still remembered the arguments her parents had during that time. He had always told her how tough it was, and he didn't want that kind of life for her. You were right, Dad, Rachel muttered to herself. You were so right. I'm a terrible soldier's wife. They had bought a nice starter home, and Derek had gotten a good job as an engineer. Life had seemed full of promise, until Uncle Sam came calling. When Derek received his deployment orders, she had torn into him for abandoning her. Worse still, when Derek left for Iraq, she had been 4 months pregnant. Rachel wiped her eyes as she crawled through traffic. She remembered the crushing loneliness she had felt during his absence. Sure, her parents had done their best to help, but the sleepless nights alone were unbearable. She had needed Derek there, to hold her, to whisper that everything would be okay. But he wasn't. She knew she was being selfish, but that didn't make the nights any less cold and empty. Her mom had moved in with her during the last month of her pregnancy, which helped a little. Rachel and her mom, Susan, had always had a close relationship. They were so alike that it often felt like they were more best friends than mother and daughter. But there were things her mom just wouldn't talk about. Her marriage to Rachel's father during his Navy days was one of them. Anytime Rachel tried to bring it up, her mother would get upset. Derek had returned home the day after their son, Randy, was born. For a brief moment, it felt like they were a real family again, but it didn't last. Derek had to leave again after just 10 days, and she was left to cope alone. Her mother saw the signs and had begged her not to give in to temptation. She would often warn Rachel about the damage one mistake could cause to so many lives. Of course, her mom never went into detail, but Rachel suspected her father might have had an affair during his time in the Navy. Her parents were always polite to each other, even friendly, but there was no passion between them. It was like they were just roommates. Rachel remembered the overwhelming depression and loneliness she struggled with in the months after giving birth. Returning to work had helped at first. That was when she was assigned to work with Ryan Carter. Where Derek had the rugged, boy-next-door charm, Ryan looked like he could have been a male model. His soft baritone voice and charming smile made Rachel's heart skip every time Ryan walked into the room. He had a confident air about him, one that left a lasting impression. She knew he was married to a gorgeous, wealthy socialite from New York. She and their kids had only moved to the area a couple of years ago. Rachel had even met his wife at a party once. She was beautiful in a very artificial way, the kind of beauty perfect for a reality TV housewife. It only made Ryan more tempting. Not long after they started working together, Rachel gave in to the temptation. Gave in? She cringed. That's not true. I was the one who flirted with him. A short, 2-day business trip with the project team turned their harmless flirting into a full-blown affair. They met a few more times before she ended things just before Derek came back. When he returned, Derek had changed. The carefree, easygoing side of him had all but disappeared. She knew the deployment had been hard on him. He'd lost several close friends. For months after his return, Rachel just held him, trying to bring back the man she had married. She had no doubt she loved him, and her time with Ryan had been nothing more than a moment of weakness. But just when things started to seem good again, the orders came for him to deploy to Afghanistan. It crushed her. So, 2 months after he left, she found herself back in Ryan's arms. She knew there was no excuse, but loneliness and fear overwhelmed the guilt. She had chased after Ryan again, using all her charm to lure him away from the woman in the marketing department he had started seeing after their affair ended. Her face burned with shame at the memory of what she had done. Of course you're ashamed, but that didn't stop you, did it? Rachel cursed herself. She tried to hold back her tears, but they kept coming, spilling out alongside the self-loathing. Ryan had spent several weekends at her house, even convincing her to take part in another project just to be near him. At one point, Rachel had even considered leaving Derek. Then reality hit. Rachel, Randy, and her parents made the trip to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to meet Derek when he returned for RNPR. The trip had been tense. Rachel was pretty sure her parents suspected something, but they hadn't said anything. But when she saw Derek, all her fears melted away. When he hugged her and kissed her, she remembered exactly why she had married him in the first place. They spent every moment reconnecting, rebuilding their marriage and strengthening their family. Rachel smiled faintly as she recalled that time. Derek had been so passionate, so tender, so loving, and in that moment, she promised herself she would never betray him again. Then, Derek told her he wasn't going back to the army. 4 months after returning from Afghanistan, he would become a civilian. She cried openly, relieved that they would finally be a real family again. After coming back from Fort Bragg, she cut off all ties with Ryan, much to his disappointment and anger. She threw herself into preparing for Derek's return. Rachel even started seeing a doctor to help with her fears and loneliness. She was diagnosed with clinical depression and began counseling and medication. As the months passed, she felt herself growing stronger, both mentally and emotionally. Every day she swore she would make it up to Derek by being the best wife she could. When Derek returned several months later, she fulfilled her vows. She gave him everything, her body, her attention, her love. But Tess had been right, something was different this time. Derek was more cautious, less willing to share his heart. Rachel had thought it was just because of what he'd been through overseas. But now, the horrible realization was setting in. He already knew about her affair, and the thought terrified her. Derek stared out the window, watching the light rain fall on the unfortunate souls caught outside. He knew the drizzle wouldn't last long, soon the sun would break through again. Not soon enough, he thought. Not soon enough. He glanced back at the small dot on his laptop screen. She had been stuck for a while, but now her SUV was moving again through the traffic. Taking a deep breath, he checked his watch. It was time to make the call. Depending on how it went, this could be the last time he ever spoke to the woman he had loved for the last 6 years. Rachel nearly jerked the steering wheel when her phone rang. A quick glance showed it was him. She said a short prayer, took a deep breath, and answered. "Derek?" "Yes, it's me," he replied. "Baby, please," she said, trying desperately to suppress her sobs. "Please, let me explain. Let me tell you how sorry I am." "Cute," Derek said, his voice emotionless. "Derek?" she asked, the silence growing unbearable. "Are you still there?" "Yes, for now," he responded tersely. "Where are you? Are you at home with Randy?" "I don't have a home, Rachel," he replied, his voice cracking ever so slightly. "You took care of that." "Where are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It doesn't matter. I'm just waiting." "For me?" she asked hopefully. "Are you waiting for me, honey?" Rachel couldn't stop the sobs from escaping her throat. She had never heard so much pain and anger in his voice before, and certainly never directed at her. "Derek, please," she begged. "Derek, please. I have so much to say. I messed up so bad. I know I did, but I need to talk to you. I have so much to tell you. I love you, baby." "Only you," Rachel pleaded, her voice thick with desperation. There was silence on the other end of the line. "Okay, Rachel, say what you need to say. But I doubt any of it will make a difference. You slept with someone else while I was away, not once, but many times. So what the hell could you possibly say now that'll change that? Please, Derek, please, for us," she begged through her tears. "Don't leave us until I can see you. Please, baby." "Us?" he hissed. What about what you did to us? No, she screamed into the phone. I know what I did, but I never gave up on us. I was alone and scared. I know that's not an excuse, but it's what happened. I love you, and I still believe in us, honey. I want to fix everything. Are you serious? Derek asked, surprised. He paused, questioning whether she truly believed what she was saying. You mean to tell me you didn't abandon us while you were on your knees for him? What about screaming his name over and over again? How can you even think that doesn't mean abandoning us? All she could do was cry as she navigated through traffic, trying desperately to get to him. She thought that if she could just see him face to face, maybe he would understand her remorse. Maybe then there would be a sliver of hope. Derek's voice was bitter. I finally got proof that my wife cheated on me while I was in Afghanistan. I think we're both lucky. If I'd found out while I was still stateside, I might have killed you and that idiot. After a few moments, he sighed. Rachel, this is going to be our last conversation. If we get disconnected, or one of us gets put on hold, there won't be another call. Derek, please, she sobbed. We can see a counselor. We can fix this, baby. We really can. Listen, there are some things you need to know before you get home. First, I've cleaned out all our accounts and canceled all our credit cards. I figured you've been screwing me over for the last 3 years, so I'm just returning the favor. He ignored her gasp. You can keep the house. I'm sure I can still smell someone else in our bed. I've taken everything I wanted. It all fit into one suitcase, so the rest is yours. Oh, and you can keep the SUV, though I don't know how you're going to pay for it, since I'm guessing you'll be fired tomorrow. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. I sent the photos to all your colleagues, our family, our friends, even the church, Derek continued coldly. I also uploaded them, along with some videos, to a few websites, complete with your information. I'm guessing you're going to be quite popular soon. Oh, Derek, no, Rachel sobbed. Why couldn't you wait until we talked? I waited, Rachel, he said calmly. I waited 4 months after I got back. But you never said anything. And you wouldn't have, if you hadn't been caught, right, baby? What could she say? He was right. As for your little plaything, Derek chuckled. I almost paid him a visit. But after spending some time with his wife, I don't think that'll be necessary. Funny thing, his wife's family has some interesting connections. I'll be surprised if Ryan makes it a year without an accident. And as for you? Well, you might want to watch your back too. Derek, please, give me a chance to make things right, Rachel begged. Her phone beeped, showing an incoming call. She recognized the number. Derek, it's Mrs. Adams from next door. I told her if you put me on hold, we're done, he said, his voice suddenly threatening. Startled, Rachel replied softly, okay, baby. I just wanted to make sure nothing happened to Randy. Randy's fine, Derek's voice softened a little. He's with me, sound asleep. Rachel let out a small sigh of relief. Speaking of Ryan's wife, Isabella, Derek began calmly, but he was interrupted by another call coming in. Another neighbor. Honey, it's Mrs. Clark. Are you sure Randy's okay? Yeah, Randy and I are fine, Derek said in such an eerie tone that Rachel's panic began to rise again. He grinned. Now, about Isabella. While you and that idiot were off acting like a couple of teenagers, I spent some time getting to know his wife. Hell of a woman. Rachel choked on her tears, feeling her heart break all over again at Derek's betrayal. I wish I could tell you she's better in bed than you, but the truth is, she's not, Derek continued cruelly. Between her whining about how and where she wants things, there's no time for any real fun. I'm sure Ryan would agree. So, congratulations, Rachel, you've won the Best of the Worst award. Derek, please stop, Rachel sobbed, her voice breaking. Just stop. She pounded her fists against the steering wheel, shouting curses at the slow-moving traffic around her. Slowly, she regained control and wiped the tears from her face. Okay, Derek, she sniffled. You win. You've gotten your revenge. You've broken me. She waited for his response, but there was only silence. But I still love you, Derek, she whispered. I know there's no excuse for what I did, but all I'm asking for is a chance to make things right. I'm begging you, please, let me explain. There are medical reasons you need to know about. If you ever loved me, please meet with me. Please, baby. Medical reasons? Derek scoffed. What? Postpartum depression? Clinical depression? Bipolar disorder? Hell, throw PTSD in there. It doesn't matter, Rachel. You still went and screwed some other guy. That's the only diagnosis that matters. It really doesn't matter. Once you crossed that line, I hired people to keep an eye on you. They did a great job, too, tapping phones, installing cameras all over our house, even putting one in our bedroom. Oh, Derek, Rachel gasped. Do you really hate me so much that you'd go this far? Is there really no love left? There was, he said quietly. Until I watched the video of you and him in our bed. Do you remember that time, Rachel? When Randy walked in on you, Rachel gasped, her heart sinking. Oh God, no. Please, not that. Derek's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Imagine how I felt, watching our 2-year-old son call another man daddy. Everything I ever felt for you died in that moment, as I watched you tuck our son into bed with both of you. His voice trembled. Damn you, Rachel. I was lucky I didn't know this before Fort Bragg. When I finally saw it, I almost lost myself, and I was in a place where getting lost isn't an option. Derek glanced at his laptop and saw Rachel was almost home. A cruel smile twisted his face as he spoke in an icy tone. You're worried about what I've done so far? Rachel, I haven't even started yet. I still have some surprises, Rachel gasped. Oh my God, she whispered. Surprises, he finished. Rachel pulled her SUV to the side of the road, staring in horror as flames consumed what had once been their home. Like I said, Rachel, the house and everything in it belongs to you now. She shook with disbelief, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Damn it, Derek, what did you do? That's a rhetorical question, isn't it? Derek said with a grin. I was trained to build in combat zones, Rachel. Doesn't it make sense that I might know a thing or two about destruction, too? Where's Randy? She screamed. Damn it, Derek, where is my son? Our son, Derek corrected coldly, is 3 feet away from me, fast asleep in his car seat, her panic rising. Rachel muttered, What? Tell me, he continued, mocking her. Can you read the message I left in our front yard? What message? She mumbled, still in shock. Derek chuckled darkly. I wasn't sure it'd be visible from the ground, but the news helicopters should have a field day with the word cheater burned into the lawn. I wouldn't expect much sympathy from the neighbors either. I posted those photos around the block and even paid some teenagers to hand out more copies. He paused, letting her sobs echo through the phone before speaking again. Rachel, you might want to start thinking about where you're going to sleep tonight, and for the foreseeable future. Maybe you could sleep in your SUV until the repo company comes for it. Or maybe, no, I doubt Ryan will be much help. I'm sure Isabella's already tearing him apart. So, what's left? Your parents? I wonder how your dad will react to having 2 cheaters under his roof. What? Rachel sobbed through her tears. Damn it, Rachel, are you really that clueless? Derek snapped. You always told me your dad cheated on your mom while he was in the Navy. Well, it turns out you had it backwards. It was your mother who cheated on him. Mother? Rachel's voice shook with disbelief. Derek laughed cruelly. Oh, hell yes. Your dad told me all about it after I came back from Iraq. Why do you think he told me, Rachel? Do you think he suspected his little girl was following in her mother's footsteps? He paused, letting the silence hang. But unlike your dad, I can't live with a cheating wife. Maybe he stayed for you, or maybe he still loved her. I don't know, that was his choice. Mine? Mine is to start over and hopefully find a woman who'll love me, be faithful, and be a good mother to Randy. Please, Derek, Rachel sobbed. I can be that wife. Just give me one more chance to prove it. I'm already a good mother to Randy. I'm the only mother he needs. I suppose that's something the court will decide, isn't it? Derek said calmly. Of course, the fact that I burned down our house and pretty much bankrupted us probably won't look great for me in court. Derek noticed a young man in a t-shirt and baseball cap step out of a taxi and pause by the side of the road, glancing in his direction. Derek flashed his headlights twice, signaling him to come over. Okay, Rachel, Derek said calmly, glancing at his watch. There are a few things you need to know, and we don't have much time left, so listen carefully. First of all, don't worry too much about your bosses panicking over my threats. However, Isabella is filing a similar lawsuit and is likely to win. I think the court will be quite taken with her, and all the evidence I gave her. He cleared his throat. As for me, well, I don't like my odds in court, so I've made arrangements to work overseas. I think Randy and I are going to enjoy it. No. Rachel shouted into the phone. You can't take my son. Actually, he's my son, Rachel. And yes, I can. No, Derek, please, she begged. He's my son, too. Derek's voice remained cold. Rachel, in a few years, he won't even remember you. But don't worry, I'll send you pictures at Christmas. Maybe we'll give you a call on Mother's Day and his birthday. Since we won't know where you'll be, I guess we'll just contact your parents. Rachel cried bitterly, the hopelessness of her situation sinking in. Derek sat silently for a moment, feeling a flicker of unease about his own actions. He knew full well he wasn't going to send her pictures or call her. The idea that she would sit there year after year, waiting for calls that would never come, reliving the pain of his revenge, that was far more brutal than he had originally planned. Goodbye, he said coldly. I hope you rot in hell. He wiped away a single tear as he listened to her hysterical sobs, begging for their son, and then hung up the phone. Captain Green, the young man in the t-shirt asked as he approached. Not anymore, Derek smiled weakly. Just Derek Green. Well, for a little while longer. The young man grinned, handing him an envelope with account numbers and passwords for the offshore bank accounts where his funds had been transferred, minus some fees, of course. Here are the passports, photo IDs, and plane tickets for David Stone and his son, Liam Stone, the young man said with a smile. Derek's smile widened. He pulled out his old IDs and the SIM cards from his phones, dropping them into a small metal bucket. Grinning, he lit them with a lighter, watching them melt into a pool of blackened plastic. Then, he took a small hammer, smashed both phones to pieces, and tossed the remains into the bucket. Satisfied, he threw the bucket into a nearby trash can. This worked out even better than I imagined, Derek chuckled. He took out the car keys and handed them to the young man. Tell Dan and Tom thanks for the rental, he said quietly. To who? The young man asked, smiling wide. Oh, never mind, Derek grinned. Must have been a mistake. A few minutes later, Derek was checking his luggage at the airport. He couldn't help but smile as he thought about what was waiting for him and his son in the coming weeks. His new contract didn't start until next month, so they'd be spending some time on a secluded beach with a beautiful lieutenant he'd met in Afghanistan. Back then, they had been just friends, but now, with proof of his wife's betrayal, Derek was eager to see if there was something more between them. Mr. Stone, the man at the check-in desk said politely, have a wonderful flight for you and your son. With a quiet nod, David Stone and his son walked through the terminal, ready to start their new life.